friends. Welcome to the Ruth Jo Simons podcast. One of the most common questions I get from you all is, are any of your boys like you? Do any of your boys take on your artistic tendencies? And my answer always is yes, several of them. But there's one boy out of the six Simons Mancubs that is, I would say, the most like me in terms of drawing and painting and kind of always able to create out of nothing. So I've got with me today creative man cub number two, Liam Simons. Welcome, Liam,
Hello,
to the
hello.
podcast. It's kind of fun. It's the first time to have Liam with me. So, do you think of yourself that way? Do you think of yourself as the creative? I mean, let's just all name the unique quality in the room. You're the only one in the whole family that has super curly hair. So we always say you are like the unique one, but do you feel that way, like about your giftings and creativity?
I generally would say so. I mean, like, especially when I was little, I was the one that was always carrying around a sketchbook and drawing in the car and things like that. And not that none of the other brothers did, but I was certainly the one that pursued that a lot. And so um, it generally has set me apart in my mind, for better or for worse.
You know, when you were really little, we love to watch these videos from when you were a kid, but like the at the youngest age, you were like cutting vegetables, cooking, plating food, and you were artistic even from the beginning with like all sorts of creative things. You would make believe like restaurants and you loved cooking. I mean that, and you still love cooking now. That's
hmm
still a form of creativity. But I feel like in terms of visual arts, you're really the one that's taken the greatest liking to drawing. You haven't painted a lot, but you love being creative with visual arts, with drawing, so much so that you're getting your degree in it.
Yeah, I am working on my junior year with a major in graphic design with an emphasis in advertising. It's been a blast doing that and kind of transferring things that I've spent in the end, like a lot of my childhood, kind of working on, and then turning it into a digital medium, a medium that I see every day out and about in ads and social media and posters and all that. And so that's been a whole lot of fun.
So describe for anyone who's listening or watching, what are your favorite things to draw or illustrate?
Um, so I would largely say my favorite medium definitely has been ink. I got a massive vat of India ink and a dip pen recently, and have been going absolutely going ham with it.
You
And
started off with micron pens though, right?
I did, yeah. Used micron pens a lot. I believe it was last Christmas I got like a packet of about 25 of them, and I think all of them are bone dry right now. um, and so I was like, I'm gonna try something different, and I got some India ink, and that has been a whole lot of fun. I lean very heavily towards illustration when I'm working on those things, doing um, like full scale illustrative things. A lot of storytelling style aspects in what I work with. Yeah.
Like as in you would love to animate like cartoons and movies, or do you mean like you love storytelling as in one image that kind of depicts a whole thing that's going on?
I find animation to be incredibly fascinating. Like I study it a lot, but it is incredibly difficult. I've tried and failed with it. Illustration from the sense of just like a still image and trying to like pack as many elements into it that might show the viewer like, hey, there's something going on in this is what I really enjoy. Like all the little tidbits that I throw in there.
Sometimes you have characters, you
Yeah.
love technical things, sometimes you do vehicles and cars and boats and
hmm
but you especially love to like do caricatures of people
Yeah.
doing really interesting things. We could probably insert some images of that. But let me ask you this. I guess I feel like, when I talk to you, and I don't know if you overheard me say this the other day, but I was actually saying that I was watching you. Um, you were working on some stuff, and you were just being so. You're too young to know who this is, but I told Baba, I said, he was just like MacGyvering it. You don't know what I'm referencing,
I
right?
I
You
I know
actually
the
do?
reference. I know the
Okay,
reference.
there was a TV character named MacGyver, and all my older podcast listeners will like nod their heads. Anyone young, it was just a guy who could like fix anything with anything. So it's like if he had a paper clip in his pocket, if he had like a scrap of paper, a receipt, he'd be like to be able to MacGyver it. Like we turned it into a verb. And you were doing that the other day, and I was like watching you, and even the way you were like talking about it, explaining it to your younger brothers, you were like patient and calm. And just as a side note, you're also the brother that was with Judah during his accident, and calm and patient and thought right in the moment, in the middle of chaos, you knew what to do in the moment. And so like I said to Baba, I said, he just reminds me so much of my dad. And like that kind of like engineering mind, but creative, like, let's do this in a way that nobody's thought of yet. Let's do this in a different way. And I was thinking about how my story, and I think you may know a little bit about this, but I feel like everybody sees me as, this person who's gotten to write books and create art. And by most standards, I've been successful at it. And yet, I don't think it was really encouraged of me when I was a kid. Like, I don't feel like it was an acceptable, I didn't feel that it was an acceptable way to like use my life. I didn't really know if there was a way to serve God with it. I didn't really feel like it was something that you could actually make a career out of. And so it was always something that I did on the side. So like I would be in class and I would um, and I don't know if my listeners actually know this about me, but um, I never thought I was going to do anything with the art. That's why it's fascinating to me that I'm the founder of Grace Laced and that I've gotten to send my art all over the world and it's published in books. But I would take notes in science class and literally like draw my left hand because I was always wanting to draw something. And I was so fascinated with it. And so I guess my question for you is, and there's no wrong answer here, and I don't mind you sharing, maybe even honestly, in a way where we can always edit later, but just kidding. Like, do you feel like we encouraged you? Do you feel like you were free to pursue? Like, is art something that you feel like you just can't get away from it? You're just so made for it? Because I'm curious because you're good at a lot of things, but I think a lot of times kids or young adults sometimes think that their creative endeavors aren't valid because they should choose something more like law or, you know, engineering or um, finance. And all those things are wonderful. We know wonderful people in each of those
Hmm.
areas of study. But if it's not your passion, then you could really feel like, wow, I studied computer science and I don't even feel interested in this whatsoever. And it could really make you feel kind of like depleted and stuck inside. And so I think our goal has always been to be able to give you the freedom to choose what really makes you passionate. But as I say that, I'm like thinking back to my own life going, gosh, it was a huge journey for me to leave behind biochemistry and say, hey, I really love art. And then it was even a bigger journey to, take I love art to I can actually serve with this. I could be a part of other people's lives with this. So,
Hmm.
thoughts?
Yeah, largely, I would definitely say at no point was art ever downplayed by you and Papa. It was never something I ever felt like ashamed of doing.
Mm.
Um, I generally believe that as a kid, most of my imagination and creative endeavors were very like inward, not for
Mm.
any negative reasons, but really like I read books and books and books and books, and
Haven't you
um,
written a book that none of us have read?
yeah.
How many pages?
Well, I've got roughly like 80,000 words in
Oh
multiple
my gosh.
docs that I'm currently
And I have
like
no idea
stringing
what it's
together.
about. I've never read it.
Yeah, I around like Haddon's age, so maybe like 10, 11, um, I just like got really inspired and was like just starting to throw things on paper.
Mm.
And I've still got those old moleskin journals that we got in like a six pack from Costco. I've got like seven of them that are just packed to the gills with writing. And the stuff that I did when I was really little, I go back and it is dreadful. It's really, really bad.
So you don't want me to send it to a publisher or anything?
No, not that. But when I got a device, I was like, I'm gonna start transferring this into notes, into like actual,
Did you?
into
I
a
didn't know.
digital format. And so I spent quite a while like kind of refining some of what I had and then just pitching it into notes. And then I figured out that Google Docs was a thing
Oh
and
yeah.
a little bit easier to work
Right.
with than notes. And so it started going to Google Docs. And I remember it was a few years ago, we were on a vacation and I was, it was after a big old long day. I think it was the day after travel. So we had just gotten in and like physically I was just exhausted, but my mind was like spinning round and round and I was like, oh, I got to do some writing. And I popped open my computer and I think I literally put like 20,000 words on paper right there. For like 3 hours straight, I was just like hammering out stuff and I was like, whoa, this is actually like a lot of fun. And this was like maybe freshman year of college kind of age. So that's when I really realized that something that I'd done as a hobby was something that I could actually translate into real work. So for like the past year and a half, I've been like stringing all those docs together to put it into one whole draft. And there's a whole lot of filler that I've had to write. Um, I,
So it's the art or the writing that's more, and I mean, I'm not asking you to choose because I actually got to do both, but what what is it that you love?
I mean, honestly, like it's equally split between both because honestly, the writing is something that I never intend to publish. It's not something that I like will want to hide away forever. Actually, like Ace is reading it right now.
Oh,
I'm
no way.
because I'm dead curious. I'm like, is it actually good? So I'm having him read it. I'm gonna have Stone read it, and just for fun. And Ace is having a blast
Wow.
reading it because he's like, oh, it's something you made, and I'm like, oh, it's something I made. It's it's really fun getting to share that because I don't
That is
usually.
so cool, honey.
Um, but it's really like a level of world building that I can do that then I want to I've got something physical and tangible that I can read. So I've got this like story that I can kind of formulate in my mind, but then it's something that I can draw. So those people, that world, that like all of these things I can put those elements onto paper as well.
I feel like you need, we've been invited before, but I feel like you need to go meet my friend, our family friend, Mr. Sam Smith of the Green Ember series. I mean, you could probably get a tip or two from him. So he's offered to have us out, and he's such a good friend to us, and we're such fans of his work. But I mean, I feel like it's a lost art to read and to illustrate and to like take time in those things. When you said, I just had a moment when you said, you know, it's a world I can build, and that phrase immediately makes me think of how and we appreciate it too, but how in this day and age youth and young people are generally referring to building a world on a video game or digitally or in something that is not of their creation. It's like they're using somebody else's tools and platform to create something. And I am not your expert on gaming or anything like that, but do you do you have an opinion about, I mean, I'm thinking about, you know, those who might be listening to this podcast. I hope this gets sent to any creative young people. But if there's a mom listening and it's like, you know, I really wish my kids would um, be able to be more expressive creatively and not spend all their creativity on video games. Like, what would you say? I mean, do you find that? Do you think that one benefits the other? Do you think that one distract detracts from the other? Like, what's your relationship between building in an online way versus building in your own with your own building blocks?
Um, it's so certainly with video games, I have a lot of opinions on that. Um,
Do you want to share any?
oh
I know.
no, certainly. I mean,
Okay, just share a few. We can do another episode if it's really going to
so
be about.
we never grew up playing video games like all that much. It was kind of just road trips and maybe very select few evenings. And I mean, you've got like the super well known game, something like Minecraft, and you can build stuff. And I think that there is definitely a level of creativity needed to like make things that are really, really cool. There are people who I would classify as artists who make a living off of that game, who are able to build really fascinating stuff. I have never found a digital medium to be as beneficial as like a physical medium.
Why?
And honestly, so like I got an iPad several years ago with an Apple Pencil, and I spent hundreds of hours in Procreate drawing and drawing and drawing and drawing and literally like trying to crack that nut. And I'm not sure that I have at all ever cracked a nut on Procreate. Um, Digital is so hard for my brain, at least for me personally. I know that there are plenty of people who work really well digitally, but it is incredibly difficult for me to make my thoughts work in pixels. I will I will try and just draw the basic line art for something that I want to color in, and it will take me ages. If I want to do something with ink, it's really, really quick and easy to do. I had a class this semester, image creation, and we were doing book covers, we were doing event redesigns, we were doing merchandise, and all of this stuff. And there were only two projects across the entire semester that I didn't use ink in once. Um, Everything else, I would pull out my India ink, my dip pen, or my brushes, and I would create line art that I then recolored in Photoshop, or I would create um, like general shapes that I then created paths out of in Illustrator, in Adobe Illustrator. And um, I used ink for like probably 80% of the projects in that, and then transported that into a
Because that's
digital
just the way you
medium.
can think. You think so tactile, like
Right.
is that the way it is?
And largely because I have this vision for something that I want to create, and I know that if I sit down in Illustrator or I sit down in Photoshop, it's not going to turn out the same way that it exists in my mind. If I work with pencil, paper, ink, and an eraser, I can get exactly what I want. And then I can take a photograph of it, I can scan it, I can do whatever.
I'd be so curious to know how, like, if most people feel that way, or if people have transitioned over to really, really feeling more free on digital. I don't know. I mean, I still work. Every single thing I create starts as as a piece of art that I create on paper. Like I have watercolor brushes for Procreate, and I can't really do it. I mean, I can do it for little things, but every single painting I do is still on. I mean, you helped me pick out the watercolor paper in Barcelona this summer, but I'm like upgrading to the nicest paper these days, but it's making a difference to like put that brush to paper. And I love the feeling. I mean, I'm nerding out for a minute, so whoever's still with us, thank you. You must be an artist, or you must be fascinated with this. But I mean, the way the pigment and the water pools, and the fact that your hand gets to play a part in dragging that ink, or dragging the ink, or dragging the watercolor pigment across, and the pressure that you add affects the way it soaks into the paper. You can mimic that, but you can't really get that
Right.
on digital. And so there's something about every part of your physical hand and your pressure and the way you hold a pen or hold a brush, how that interacts with paper and pigment, that I think adds character. And so I would be so sad if we never used paper. Like I would be so sad if it was always digital. But I think there's obviously I work in the digital space, and so I really respect digital art. But I do wonder sometimes if we're losing that. And honestly, I remember you telling a family friend recently, or a couple years ago, that you were planning on studying graphic design, and she specifically told you that there was no need for you to study that because AI was taking over.
Hmm.
And I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
So it's very fascinating seeing the switch. So last school year, every single professor, every single class that I sat down in, the professor was like, man, AI is really scary. This is going to take up all of our jobs. I don't know what y'all are doing here. Almost to some degree. The
That's
most,
encouraging.
yeah, the most doomsday of professors was saying like, this is really concerning, and y'all may not have necessary jobs. And then this year has been entirely different. Um, the the general word that I've been getting from professors is AI is going to be a tool for you, but it's also going to make you need to be really good. And kind of what I'm saying in that is, I at this point have seen enough AI that I can recognize it anywhere.
I agree. Yeah.
Absolutely anywhere. I can recognize AI writing. Not to out some classmates, but I can definitely tell when they use AI in their projects. And so it will certainly get better. We know that it will, but you're never going to be able to replicate an actual human design. Like to go with the most extreme of examples, AI is never going to create the next Mona Lisa, something that is so intriguing and fascinating. No one's ever going to be fascinated as much as that by something that they know is just spit out by a computer that has used all the art just culminated from every other human artist. I think there's just a uniqueness and a novelty that is never going to be replicated.
How do you think that connects to the fact that we were designed uniquely and that none of us are a replica of anything else? And, you know, we are absolutely unique. And when I think about your creativity, my creativity, your brother's, like, we're all different. I mean, there are people who are super creative with the way they landscape or garden, and that's not something I'm super good at. So it doesn't matter what medium, but I really do believe that we are all made to reflect God's creativity. And what you just described is ultimately to say we are humans. We're human beings gifted with actual gifts and talents and skills that, as good as a computer ever gets, it will never have the hand of a creator God designing it, right?
Right, right. Um, Kind of in the same sense as just like I don't believe that like AI writing. You kind of look back and see something like Tolkien or C.S. Lewis, the people who like really pioneered things like fantasy writing. Um, AI is never going to create that next genre. They're never going to like pave the way for that
Like
in the
think it
same
up
way.
itself, like
Right.
create it.
Someone like Tolkien literally wrote a boatload of languages. Like he
It's so
wrote
crazy.
languages, he created like typography and glyphs for all of these languages. He made maps, he made all of the background lore for it. He has incredible amounts of content that he generated for this, and it's all unique. It's all straight from his brain. And I look around at what ChatGPT is spitting out, and it just never seems the same. And I don't believe that it ever will be the
I mean,
same.
it's not at the caliber of Tolkien. Is that what you're saying?
Well,
Or
it's
it's not?
unable to
Yeah.
create something unique because it is only pulling from what humanity has created and this massive just pool that has been like stuck into it. So when you say create, like if you say create a fantasy world, it's only going to be able to pull from works from past people. It's not going to be able to think of it up its own thing.
Yeah.
And so going with that idea, I think that's something very uniquely created in us by God, is that we're able to generate these creative things. We could have just been made as basic thinking people that are able to like survive. We're able to grow plants. We're able to make shelter and things like that. But instead, we decide to make architecture that is unbelievably beautiful. We get to use the colors that we see in a flower and turn it into a pigment that we then splatter onto a wall or something. We went around Europe and seeing those cathedrals and things absolutely blew my mind. And seeing the shapes and the intricacy and the lengths that people went to despite having absolutely zero like power machinery is ridiculous. They spent money and time and blood, sweat, and tears making these things because they could. It did not benefit them at all in terms of like in obviously they're tourist attractions now, but financially it doesn't benefit them. But they did it because they wanted to glorify God, and it was a skill that they had that they wanted to apply. Um, so often I think we can like get stuck in a rut of just make through and squeak through, and really what I've been telling friends is like I will get very much stuck in looking at the rubric for an assignment and saying if I do this, this, and this, I'll get an okay grade. But
Yeah.
instead picking it apart and saying how can I make something that not a single one of my classmates is going to make? How can I make something that is entirely unique that the professor will open up my file and say like, whoa, never seen that before. Um, and it takes time and it takes a lot of effort. And so it's not inherently easy or exciting to want to do. Um, and that's why I don't think everyone really pursues it.
You love the Lord, and everything you do will glorify Him because you desire to glorify Him. So you're choosing to not create things that are dishonoring to Him. But if you create things that cause people to ask questions, cause people to have joy or delight, or find things whimsical, or look at nature a different way, all those things actually do point to a creator and actually can testify to a God that you serve, even if the actual content of what you're doing isn't Christian or isn't about God. You yourself, as an artist, you're pointing to the Lord.
Right, right.
So, as we land this plane and finish this conversation, I'm just thinking about some of my listeners and readers who might be creative themselves, but I'm thinking about the the mama who might be like, maybe I should encourage my child to pursue creativity and art. I just get nervous that they're going to go down the wrong path, or that they're going to, or how do I encourage them to do this? Giving them the freedom, inspiring them, but also just being an encouragement to them. Are there some simple ways you think, maybe we did right at home? Hopefully we didn't do too many things wrong, but what are some things to avoid, and what are some things to do, maybe even as a parent, to encourage a creative child?
So I honestly think to some degree I almost needed no encouragement. I needed um, some level of hitting the brakes, and I think every child that has read
Some discipline needed to help you
every
with some.
child that has read like Harry Potter or something, I certainly know that Asen hadn't have gotten like hooked on that. And there's a level of like, hey, pump the brakes and slow it down. But there is really something quite intoxicating about such creativity and such fascination in a book that's well written like that. Um, and so there's a measured balance of like, let them have at it, but also I think I spent a whole lot of time really just daydreaming and not paying attention to the world outside of me. There are definitely times where I was just like zoned out really in my own mind. So that is something to really watch out for, I suppose. Um, but
So
equally
what would be
to,
something that would encourage you to not dampen the gifting that you have? Like you're really gifted in creative things, but what can keep you um, focused, but also not dampen that creative spirit?
so I think turning it into a far more like tangible thing as give me a sketchbook and give me like something specific to do. I was we made our own sketchbooks in a class last spring, and we were given all of these weird random assignments. And the moment that I heard the assignment, I was like, "Oh, this is weird. This is dumb." And then it turned out being like my favorite thing I've ever created. Um, and so doing these just weird, funky um, things, books with illustrations in them, um, and taking them to places that they might want to draw. I think every single time I went to a mountaintop, I was like, hey, I want to like somewhat create this in a snapshot of sorts, and make it something that I can remember, not just by a photo. All of these random things encourage them to like to pursue their art in any situation they're in.
I think that's a really good point. It's that it's not just, hey, be creative because you're going to an art museum or you get 5 hours a day to watercolor. That's not art in itself. It's actually being just what you said, being creative wherever you are, right?
Right. And I've honestly spent so much time studying like shape and form that I will walk around and see like the edge of a building and be like, where would I put the perspective lines if I were drawing that? Or seeing like some random, I remember like walking around in Europe and seeing some of the sculptures and being like, if I were drawing that right now, what basic shapes would I reduce that down to begin with? And generating those basic building blocks and encouraging them to study the world around them, not just from like, oh, this is pretty, or especially as kids nowadays want to do is like, oh, let me just take a photo of this. Instead of, hey, let me just pull out my phone and take a photo and oh, how nice. How can I reduce this into a form that I can then turn into a pencil drawing, or I can maybe try and sketch later from memory or things like that. Looking at it in an entirely different dimension